I think one of the biggest fears with young professionals thinking about starting a family, or even people more experienced in their careers and choosing to start a family is what happens to my career? Will I miss out? Will I be penalized? Do I work for an employer who can support me? Will I want to go back to work? I'm Caitlin Holloway. I am a people executive, so an HR executive, an investor, and a mother. When we decided we wanted to invite children into our lives, our first experience was actually dealing with infertility, recognizing after the first 6 months, like, this should have happened by now, right? And so we kept at it. I started peeing on every stick you could, which is pretty graphic, but the reality of when you're trying to start a family. And time went on, and we were unsuccessful. And so we started visiting doctors and exploring different options, but kind of casually, I would say. And then I finally got pregnant, and we were so excited, but we hadn't really shared with anyone that we had been trying. And I was anxious, I was nervous because it had taken so long. And I actually suffered a miscarriage a few months into the first pregnancy. I was working late. There was a board meeting the next day, so I was there working on some board deck slides, and the only one in the office except for the janitor. And I felt some cramping, and I thought, it's fine. And I stood up to go to the bathroom, and I felt a rush. I knew. Thankfully, the janitor was there to help me, and she called my husband, and he came and brought me a change of clothes, and I went home and took a long shower, and then finished the board slides and went to the board meeting the next day and pretended like it was fine. Didn't even go to the doctor to confirm the miscarriage because I knew. We had kind of come to terms with maybe this wasn't meant to be for us. Obviously, the end. We have 2 children, so it's worked out. But we kind of were at that crossroads of trying to decide what our options were. Did we want to adopt? Did we want to just accept a life without children? And so we went traveling to heal our souls, and came home pregnant. I think because our path to parenthood was not so simple, I've been very, very grateful. Wanting and wishing and hoping for so long really kind of has changed my perception of what our children have added to our lives. So we're very grateful for them. That doesn't mean we don't discipline them. But I believe that my children have amplified my life greatly, and my career. So one of the privileges I've had working in tech for the last 10 years has been in this role as head of HR. I've talked a lot about in my peer group, in my circles, and within my organizations around trimester 0. And this is the phase for young people, young professionals who are considering expanding their families, and how companies and workplaces can support that. So I shared a little bit about my own experiences with infertility, and the decision-making around wanting to invite children into our world, and our challenges that we kind of faced with that. An example of that is at Reddit, we developed a policy that is called the loss of pregnancy. There are lots of reasons women lose children. Whether you're an employee or the partner of someone who has lost a pregnancy, it is one of the harder things that life can throw at you. But by having a policy in place and having the workplace say, it's okay, we support you, before you even have raised the conversation, is something that we found to be very, very powerful. So the policy is very, very simple. It just simply states that you just need to have one conversation with somebody in HR. It stays entirely confidential. If you would like to share with your manager, you may, but essentially it's anywhere from, it's as much time as you need up to 12 weeks with the loss of pregnancy. No questions asked, no proof from a doctor, nothing. Because the reality is anyone who needs to employ that policy deserves their privacy and the support. So, people ask all the time, well, what happens if people take advantage? I'm not concerned about people taking advantage. If someone needs to take advantage of a policy like that and they need to work the system, they probably have other things going on. But I want policies that support the good and the many, not the edge cases. So that was a bit tangential, but creating policies that really support people through every stage of life, including the option to expand their family or not, is really important to us. We've had a caregiver help out and supplement, and that's worked for our family so well so that I have decided to, at that point, take a switch and a change in my own career and kind of evolve the work that I had been doing and transition. So after 4 years at Reddit, I resigned in a very happy, lovely way. But I was ready to go on and try my hand at investing and really take what I learned and the relationships that I developed there and into something new. My husband has been incredible in supporting that decision, and so I quit. And then life threw us a curveball. Our caregiver was in a really bad car accident, and her husband passed away. Her 3 children were severely injured. She was severely injured, and that threw everything. So San Francisco is notorious for having very impacted daycare programs, which meant if you're not on the wait list for a year, it ain't happening. And so my husband and I had to have a very serious conversation about what we do. Do I unquit? Does he put his work on pause? And that's what we chose. So my husband is our full-time caregiver at the moment and loves it and is fantastic at it. And I'm very, very grateful for that. But it definitely, it was a tough decision for our family to make together. So yeah, that's our current situation. So I am the sole breadwinner, which has an obvious amount of pressure associated with that, but it's a role I'm comfortable filling.
My story is that my career took off literally the same time my first kid was born. I had my first child at almost 39 years old and my second at almost 42. It took years of fertility treatments and surgeries for me to get them. I'd had 7 surgeries and lots of starts and stops where we thought we were pregnant and not. Life is about trade-offs. Everywhere you turn, it's about making trade-offs. You can't have everything. It's just the reality. We had kids in Texas, in Austin, and then we moved to the Bay. And I remember distinctly negotiating with my CEO at a company called Box. I was moving out to be their CMO. And he was 30 years old, a founder, great human, had never had kids, wasn't even married. And he had never relocated one of his staff members from outside of the Bay Area to the Bay Area. And I remember he wanted me to move in like under 6 weeks. And I said, okay, so I have 2 kids, I have a 100-pound dog, and I can't, and real estate is like 3 times as expensive here. So we're gonna have to rent. And he's like, well, yeah, I mean, like we can get the package together so you can rent someplace. I was like, no. I need to rent somewhere where there's actually some grass. So I have a backyard. I have a dog that's enormous. He's the size of a small pony. And I've got 2 kids that are bouncing off the walls if they're not outside. So we live on an 1.5 acres in Texas. I'm obviously not expecting that in the Bay Area, but I need a patch of grass. Like that's a non-starter for me or I can't move. And I just remember him like processing all this and he was like, what? And I was like, no, you don't understand. I won't take the job unless I can figure out how to make this work economically. As it turns out, we ended up renting an 1,100 square foot home that it's almost 4 years now that we've been living there. So we went 3,500 square feet on an 1.5 acres of land in Austin to 1,100 square feet and literally a small patch of grass in the backyard. It was an adjustment. It's driven a level of family intimacy that we didn't have in Texas. And it's great. It's also maddening at times when it's raining 3 weeks on end, your kids can't get out of the house. And so, that's because we couldn't afford a larger house. That's just the bottom line. And in the Bay, it's crazy expensive. So what we prioritized was we need an amazing nanny to be like a third parent with us. And we had the same nanny in Texas for 6 years and she wanted to move with us. And so we said, awesome, because she literally was my kid's second mom and I trusted her with my kids' lives. Like she's still family to me. When I was interviewing with Doug Merritt, who's the CEO here at Splunk, I remember, and I was interviewing with him and he and Susan St. Ledger, who's the president, she's my boss. But I asked for 4 or 5 interviews with each of them before I talked to anybody else at this company because I wanted to make sure that they were okay with not only what I brought to the table, strengths and gaps functionally, but who I was as a human and what that required. And I just said, look, I'm a mom first. And yes, I'm a CMO. And yes, I am a high drive for results gal at work, but I'm a mom. And what that means to me is most nights when I'm in town, I actually want to be putting my kids to bed. And I cherish that time with them. And it's about a 2-hour window every night. And so if I need to be on a call, I'll do it. But if I can get on a call before or after, that's ideal. And most weekends, I'm at 8 different sporting events between the two of them, and I want to be there cheering them on and not on a conference call. So if this is a company that all weekends are consumed with work, I'm probably not your gal. If this is a company where I can't take my first calls from the road so I can drop my kids off at school some days, I'm not your gal. Like, I was very explicit on what my non-negotiables were. And so while Doug and I aren't the same people and Susan and I aren't the same people, they are incredibly respectful of the fact that I bring my best self to work when I have the flexibility to be able to be a mom. And they get the best out of me as a consequence. And they understand that versus being hard and fast about these are the things that you cannot miss. It's more about trying to figure out how we can make it work.
I started out in the investment industry where I was in sales and ended up taking a 17-year career break and returned to the workforce after raising kids. And so I was able to break into the technology space at almost 50 years old with no tech background. And so I am very passionate about both my kids and having a career, returning to work. In 2011, I moved back to the Bay Area with my kids and ended up getting divorced and after a long-term marriage, and that's when I decided to relaunch a career. And doing it as a single mom, it really, really was the most incredible thing for my kids. And I really agonized over going back to work and not being there on a day-to-day basis with them. And I didn't realize how much they would learn from that and how much they would gain from that. And they were really required to step up and help at home. And it set such a good example for them that it was really a great thing I did as a parent. Trying to get a job, I was unemployable. I mean, nobody would even talk to me. I couldn't get recruiters to talk to me. I couldn't get anybody to talk to me. So it took a lot of determination and perseverance to get back. And it took a few baby steps. I've had a few roles before finding something that I've really been able to excel in and utilize all my skills in. But it takes time. And a lot of people have not been able to get back, and men and women, actually. After taking a career gap. My first job back, I found working for an investment company here in the city, and it was 20 hours a week. So it was a really great transition. I was working Monday through Thursday, 10 to 2. So that was a great opportunity to kind of get used to commuting again and getting up to speed with the tools, which I was completely out of touch with. I think having kids and having kids that are a little bit older have helped me really understand, the generational gap, which is really a whole nother topic, right? I hear a lot of people, a lot of friends of mine think, millennials and Gen Z, and I love working with them. I find, they're huge, great workers and have a lot of really great attributes. And I think having kids has helped me understand how to better work with them. Chances are you're probably going to be coming in at a lower level than you were, and that can have long-term consequences on your career. If somebody takes 2 years off at age 30 and leaves the workforce, they're probably going to come in, it's statistically at about 60% of the income that they left. They potentially could lose as much as $1 million in retirement funds if they're saving money in a 401k plan. If you think you want to get back to a career, or you're thinking that it's going to be a short-term career gap, my recommendation is try to keep one foot in the door, do some consulting, set up a little bit of your own business. If you can show consistent work, you can have an easier time getting back into the workforce.
Maybe it would help to just think in the longer term about how the experiences you're having now will set you up for success down the line. So even if the job isn't yet the job of your dreams, you could try and find something in it that is an aspect, whether it's a skill set or an experience or exposure to an industry that might someday be super interesting to you. Try and find aspects of the work that you can build on that will help get you closer to something that does feel like meaningful work. Because I know you have to work, right? You need the paycheck. And I know it's not as simple as just walking into your dream job, but sometimes that's just a longer road. I know there's a trend toward people having kids later and later in life, and I'm part of that trend. I had, when I was, Carly came along, I would have just turned 36, so relatively late in the day, but that seems to be fairly normal now. The reason I didn't have kids earlier in life is I hadn't found Joel, to be honest. I hadn't found the person I wanted to have kids with. I had other partners, but I hadn't found the one, basically. So there's that. I was not ready in my early 30s. I wasn't ready. I think I actually wasn't ready to give enough of myself to have kids as part of it. It wasn't lost on me that this would be a dramatically different life, where you're not solely focused on yourself or yourself and your partner, and you have other people and other needs to think about. And I think, earlier in my life, I was either too busy having fun or too busy doing something else that just wasn't compatible with making that commitment, making that sacrifice, and just seeing a different way of doing things. So when I ultimately was ready, I think there is some sense of biological clock that starts to tick in a woman, where you're just like, okay, I think now is I'm prepared to do everything that it takes to do this and put my all into it. So I just, on some level, I think I just knew. There were definitely downsides to having kids later in life. I definitely didn't want to leave it so long that I felt like, well, A, it was going to be more challenging to get pregnant, or B, I would be an older parent who couldn't necessarily keep up. And I'll say all three of my singleton elder daughter and then my twins were born prematurely. Chances of that happening increases as you age. I had identical twins. Chances of that happening increases as you age. And identical twin pregnancies are very complicated. So after the twins came along, it didn't even enter my mind as to whether or not we would get pregnant again. It was too dangerous. I realized with the birth of Carly that if I was going to make the sacrifice of going back to work and leaving my child basically with a stranger for the day, that I'd need to feel really good about what I was doing, and I'd need to feel consistently fired up about what I was doing. So while I was on maternity leave, after Carly was born, I started to at least look at things in my inbox, and that led me out of consulting and into another career. So I really think becoming a parent made me shift my career to find something I could be really passionate about consistently. I've been thinking about whether being a parent has actually held me back in any way, and in all honesty, I feel really fortunate. I don't think it has. I think the one thing that is just a statement of fact is when you take 5 months of parental leave, which I've done with both of my pregnancies, because you just can't have enough time in those early days, right? You objectively just have less work experience under your belt in that same period. So there was one cycle of promotion where I was promoted 6 months later than a colleague who I viewed as a peer. And on reflection, objectively, it is fair, but at the time it didn't seem fair because he felt like a peer and I felt like I was being sort of left behind almost. I think in the bigger scheme of things, it all sorted itself out. I was promoted 6 months later, but anyone who's chasing a promotion cycle knows that those 6 months are agonizing. So at the time it felt like a big deal. Looking back now, it really doesn't matter. And I think I try and coach folks on the team to think about the experiences that they're gaining, the skills that they're amassing, how the stories that they're able to tell by virtue of their experiences in the workplace, not the title that they've got, but at different periods of your career, of course, that matters more than other times. Certainly appreciate having had a parent who was there for me all the time. And I don't think I say thank you often enough to my mom. So if you're watching, Mom, thank you. But there's so much packed into life, and I look at the full and rich and busy lives that my daughters at the age of 8 and 10 live, and I think about and one lens for this. One lens for me of all of this is thinking about how I have felt about work travel as they've grown up. So I think back to the early days when I was first traveling as a new mom. It was excruciating to leave my baby at home. So it was hardest for me. The baby was, didn't really know what was going on as much. And then we went to a phase where it was so upsetting for a small child to see their mom on a device and not be there, that we didn't do FaceTime calls at all because it would end up with screaming and howling and sadness on both ends. And then as life has gone by, I think now we call all the time, and they're not upset, of course, they just tell me about their day. And I realize how much they pack into their days. And so while if I could be there more often, I would, but I think, I have the benefit of having a wonderful husband partner who does more than his fair share, so he's often there to make sure they feel supported. We've always had the benefit of a really strong babysitter or someone else in our lives who helps with the care, and that, I think, alleviates the challenge. And then ultimately, I miss out on some things, but my goodness, they have so many things. Life is so rich and busy, and I feel like every time I get to see a performance or spend more time with them, then it's a win, basically. So I try not to obsess about the fact that I'm not seeing every single moment of their life. If I could go back in time and change anything about being a new parent, I think I would try and put less pressure on myself. I have a sort of slightly funny, maybe vaguely embarrassing story. So one of the things that people don't talk about before they are actually pregnant and with child is breastfeeding, which, by the way, is one of the most difficult things in the world. Just going to say it. And it's especially difficult when you go back to work to figure out how do you get breast milk to your child. So I remember back in the early days at LinkedIn, I'd be getting in the car, racing down to Mountain View. I'd be working full days. I'd been trying to look at my schedule and squeeze in like a pumping session at some point in the day. And it was just awful, the whole thing. And then what finally broke me was I had carved out a 20-minute period to go and, find the breast pump and do the thing. And I go to the mother's room, the one mother's room there was at LinkedIn at the time, and it was being painted. So there were like workers in there, and I was just like, what do I do? Where do I go? So there was an EA who saw my quandary and sort of took pity on me, and she was like, "Psst, come here." And so she led me to, I think it was the CTO's office at the time, because he was traveling, and she said, "You can use the room, just lock the door." But there I was sitting in our CTO's office with a breast pump, looking around at some random man's office and photos and thinking, this is just weird. So not long after that, I gave up. I decided it was time for formula, and I cut myself a break, and that was actually very necessary from like a health and a psychological perspective, I think. But that's one of those things that you just don't really talk about until you're in that moment. There is no problem at all with giving formula to babies. I think popular wisdom has gone back and forth over what's actually better for kids. I know many kids, I think in the 70s or early 80s, were raised on formula because people thought at the time it was better for you. And then, of course, the science, as I said, flips back and forth. So there is some level of pressure, I think, on new moms to breastfeed. And in some ways, you run the risk of feeling inadequate if for some reason you can't do that. But I think a lot of it is sort of the pressure of society rather than anything scientifically that will hurt your kid.
It was part of the Apple team that actually launched the Mac, and we got to work with Steve Jobs. There was a team of about 15 of us, and we worked directly with Apple and their marketing department. It is really expensive to have kids in the Bay Area, and that's why I did work, because I knew that if I didn't, that we couldn't live the kind of life we wanted to live and have the kids go to the best schools they could get into. What I did was just decide that I'm going to have to make money and make a certain amount of money so that I could really contribute just as well. And the only way I could figure it out was, doing my business the way I said. When I went to work went to talk to this partner at Mayfield Fund, as he listened, he got to know me better, and then he was thinking about his own daughter, he told me, and when he said, okay, look, yeah, we'll work with you, and we'll try this out. And it was because he had been thinking in the back of his mind, okay, I have a daughter that I'd like to have her have opportunities when she's Jennifer's age, and let's make sure that I at least create this path for Jennifer that I can feel good then that maybe somebody someday will create for my daughter. Well, first and foremost, I really wanted to be a mom. I didn't want to just be a working person that had children. And so what I did is I made the kids the first thing I thought about every day. And so what I had to do was, especially with my own business, I had to start earlier because I had to get clients and also do the work. So I ended up getting up about 2:30 in the morning, starting from the time I had Mason, and I carried that on for about 20 years. So I'd go to bed at 10 o'clock and I'd get up at 2:30, and then I'd work from 2:30 to 6. And then, because a lot of my clients at that time were on the East Coast, and so I would just really work those hours. And it was exhausting, but I didn't see any other solution, and it ended up being okay because I adjusted to it. But I saw myself in pictures about 20 years after I started doing that schedule, and I looked like hell. I mean, I was all baggy and just looked like hell. So I just said, this is obviously taking a toll on my body. But at that point, I'd sort of gotten myself into that structure, and then once my kids went to college, I changed the schedule. But ultimately, I really lived that life because I wanted to make sure that I was with the kids as much as I could be during the day, and I got my work done, and that's how I figured out how to do it. I ended up not having very close friendships with any of our kids' school moms. I mean, most of them didn't work. There was only one woman that was my age that worked in our neighborhood, and otherwise all the moms just basically were full-time moms, and so they didn't understand why I couldn't hang out with them more. And then as time passed and years passed and my kids were then like 8 and 10, it got to be much more that they accepted the fact that they'd never be able to be friends with me or see me. So I didn't have close friendships with women. Most of my friendships were with guys that I worked with. And sometimes it would be with their wives, but not usually, because their wives would feel like, oh, I can't really be friends with Jennifer because I don't work, and so therefore I can't really share the kind of environment that she has to live in every day. And so I just didn't have many women friends for years. And then it started happening that I increased my women friends as the kids got into high school, when they had more time for their friends and made more time for their friends, and I had time to share. But it definitely was hard at first to not have any women friends, and it just, I don't know if it was something that I could have gotten over, but I just couldn't figure out how to balance it with the working and then the taking care of the family, and the family first in my mind. And I just didn't want to, sacrifice my kids' time that I had with them and put it into my friends.
After getting married, that I didn't want to have kids, and I told my husband, hey, just so you know, we may never have children together.
I've always really wanted kids. When I was at Google and before I had kids, I worried a lot because I thought that I'd want to stay home with them and that I'd want to stop working. I love babies and children. It's just always something I wanted. And then I was surprised during toward the end of maternity leave, when I first had my first child, the first 6 weeks after he was born, I thought, I can never go back to work. How am I going to do this? I'm going to beg my then husband to somehow make it work so I don't have to go back.
When people heard that I was pregnant and they wanted me to, talk about it, my boss said, well, I got to tell you something. I'm not sure how we're going to handle your being pregnant, because you're general manager of this firm and a senior VP, and you're kind of the leader of $10 million worth of business for us. And if you leave for even just a month, what's going to happen to the business? And so I would suggest, there are people behind me that can take over, but he just felt really comfortable only with me. So in the end, about 3 weeks before I had Mason, he told me that I would no longer be vice president general manager when I came back. And that really upset me. And so I ended up having my baby, Mason, and then the next, well, it was in 48 hours from that time. So what happened, I think I got so stressed out over the fact that I was, being replaced. And again, in those days, you could have that done to you. It isn't like it was against the law or anything like that. That was pretty much accepted. That people would just say, well, when you are having a kid, it's kind of hard to control, and especially in a marketing firm that I was with. And so he just replaced me, and that's when I decided I would quit. After I knew I wasn't going to come back after that moment, and I got so upset. I think I did have the baby earlier than I would have, because he was 3 weeks early.
I'm asking for 4 months, and I want you to submit my business case up to my senior vice president. And I said, if people believe that I'm not the same human because I'm asking for an extra month with my child, then this isn't the place I want to be long term. I said, and we can cross that bridge when we get there, but I appreciate your intellectual honesty on this, but this is my decision and I'm not wavering. And I remember he sent the email to my SVP, and my SVP was a really bright, incredibly gifted marketer, also a little salty sometimes. And we weren't sure how he was going to react. And they copied HR, and the HR person came back and said, well, we don't approve extra months. And I will never forget this. I was watching my inbox, and literally less than 5 minutes later, a note came over the top of that from the SVP, and he was like, something to the effect of, you don't fucking get to approve this. It's my organization, and I don't care what the policy is. Carrie has earned the right to have another month, and she should take it. And then he sent me a private note, and he said, I've approved, and we're not going to discuss this. And he sent me a private note, and he said, hey, I wish I had taken more time when my kids were born. Go enjoy the time. And I remember in that moment thinking, it could have gone the opposite direction and could have gotten really ugly very fast. But having the courage of conviction and knowing that that was what was right for me and my family, and knowing that if I had to leave Dell, I could do that, was the right thing. And as it turns out, my leadership team was incredibly supportive, but it was kind of harrowing getting to that place of asking.
The disparities in parental leave creates a major challenge for same-sex couples. You might only have like 6 weeks, if that, of bonding period, but it creates a gap in terms of you don't get to have time with your child that is really critical. Like I am a birth parent, and as a parent, it's period. It is the most important time you could have. And I had, I think, like 5 months, and my only wish was that I had more time. Here is a short list of what workplaces can do to create an environment where all working parents can make work and can thrive as employees, as parents. One, making sure that you have parental leave, equal parental leave, not maternity leave and paternity leave, but if you offer 12 weeks, it is 12 weeks of parental leave to be taken by anyone who is welcoming a new child into their family, period.
I was incredibly nervous about sharing this amazing news about being pregnant. And I sort of blurted it out, and my fear was basically stemmed from the fact that I thought I might be cut out of decisions. I thought it might affect my career path and growth, knowing that I was going to be out of work for at least 6 months. I was based in the UK, and the parental leave is a little bit longer there. And so I kind of blurted it out in a really crazy and nervous way. And I remember still the reaction from my manager, who's a man, where he said, this is a good thing, right? Congratulations. And I think from that moment, I realized that a lot of my anxiety and fear was in my head. After our first daughter was born, we immediately wanted to have a larger family. And after trying a couple of different ways to do that, we really felt like adoption was a great choice for us, for a number of reasons. The capacity to love another child didn't necessarily mean that I needed to be pregnant to do that. With adoption, you lose a lot of control, right? You lose a lot of control over the health of the pregnancy and what you would tend to do. And so my advice would be for people who are considering it, really think about how comfortable you are giving up that control. And it isn't an easy process, but it is absolutely a satisfying process. And the emotional toll that can come with that, because you never know exactly, is it going to work, is it not going to work? Would a lot of adoptive parents worry about, will the biological parents change their mind? And so those are all very real challenges that you have to work through. For us, I would not change our decision for a second. Ava has brought so much joy into our family. It is just a pure blessing. Children out there, babies, foster kids who don't have the opportunity of a family, and there are a lot of amazing families, and so it's about matching those opportunities together.
I think I had 3 or 4 weeks totally out of the office, and then I came in once or twice a week for a couple hours with the baby. So I brought him along and had him near me if he was hungry or needed a change or anything. I was there, but I just kind of held him on me. And then I think he was 6 or 8 weeks old when I took him to the Andreessen Horowitz CEO Summit in LA. I didn't ask for permission to do that. I just showed up with him. I wasn't sure what they would say if I'd asked, but I also didn't really want them to have the opportunity to say no. So it's almost easier to be the CEO. What's really hard is when you're in an environment that's just not supportive and you don't have any control or any power to be able to change that. And I watch moms have to take jobs that are less interesting for one reason or another, or maybe have less opportunity behind them because it affords a schedule they can, or frankly, it affords a cash flow. I mean, look, I am for sure blessed I think part of having a kid later means I have more savings. I earn more today than I did when I was 20. That certainly makes it easier. I don't think it's ever easy financially to be a parent. No matter where you live.
As a result of just being at LinkedIn, which is a big company and a really family-friendly company, so we have a lot of parents in LinkedIn. We have the Slack channel, which is Mothers at LinkedIn, and we just talk about all of these things. And there's a parent swap channel where they just mention all the stuff that the children are not using and they might need, and then we can trade those things. We just trade toys and things because we have children of all ages. We generally do these things to just make sure that we're not wasting the world's resources.
You have to get to work, you have to come back from work, and they were sick. You don't want to leave your kids if you don't have to when they're really sick, and I was sick. And they told me to pick between the two, so I brought them to work with me, and look back, it was crazy, but I had these little, not pillowcases, but what do you call it, sleeping bags? And I had them next to my desk, and I had their pillows, and I made sure they had their soup and their tea and their food, and they came in why would you, they're sick, why are they here? You told me to pick, and I'm never gonna pick work over my family, but I need work to support my family.
The basics about how flexible is the work environment. And this is something that's often flagged as something important for parents, but it's really important for anybody. You need to be able to work from home, you need to be able to work from anywhere, remotely, so that you can work wherever you are.
The one thing that I as a parent certainly prize above everything else is flexibility. So I think life happens, things come up, if you really need to be at a parent-teacher conference or at your kid's first ever performance of X, of course you want to go do that. And I think I've seen varying sort of levels of comfort and flexibility around just these needs that crop up in everyday life for parents. So I think what I can do and what leaders can do in general is just be open to and empathetic to those needs. So long as people understand that they have to fulfill their end of the bargain, do the work at some other time, or get the job done and not let the side down. I'm very open to flexibility, and I wish that more employers were, because that really, at the end of the day, makes everything possible for parents who are trying to juggle all the different aspects of their life.
When I was younger in my career, before having children, I was told to learn how to get really good at juggling. Learn how to, do multiple things at once and be great at keeping your eye on the ball, but focused on the future. So I got good at juggling. And I spent many years of my career trying to get really good at that. And then as I became a mother, I was told, okay, now you have to be really good at knowing when to drop balls. So you have more balls in play, be really good and intentional about which balls you're going to drop. So I said, okay, I'm juggling, and okay, I'm gonna drop that one, and okay, keep going, I'm gonna drop that one. And I thought that was really good. And so I had been practicing that. And then, another kid, so another ball in the air. Okay, more things to drop, okay. So as long as I'm intentional about what I'm letting go, it's okay. And so that's how I manage prioritization. And now that I'm getting older, hopefully a little wiser, a new mentor recently told me something that I thought was pretty profound. And she said, okay, now that you've learned how to juggle and you've learned how to intentionally drop balls, now you need to recognize that the balls that are in play are not all created equally. These are not all rubber balls that will bounce back. Some are more fragile. Some may be made of glass. Others may be as heavy as bowling balls. How do you decide which ones to drop now? Some are rubber and they'll bounce back pretty quickly. Others, if you drop them, they'll break. So where I am now in my juggling career is I've learned that the balls that are fragile and will break are the relationships with my children and the relationships with my husband. So all the other balls, I'm comfortable now letting go, and I'm comfortable taking bigger risks with. But I recognize that the fragile ones are the ones that are the most important.
Dads do not get enough credit sometimes. So, I know working moms often shoulder more of the work burden, whether it's keeping up the household or parenting and so forth. I'm super fortunate to be in a relationship where my husband has actually done more of the heavy lifting over the last several years than I have, and that's what's enabled me to continue growing in my career and continue moving forward. So I'm endlessly grateful for that, certainly. For dads, I think, if you are not in that situation, if you are the primary breadwinner and if you are the one who is maybe less present, is just, again, having empathy for your partner and making sure that you express appreciation and that you do your part when you can, and you maybe pause and think about what is truly helpful.
I don't look at being a solo parent as being both parents, because there's stuff that I think a father or one or the other, like a mother or father, can give a child that's very different. I look at myself as their only parent, as far as, and I'm very careful with how I say it, their father is not against them. He just has some things that he needs to make sure that he needs to make sure he's okay. And he's working on some of his own life things. So as far as support for them and being there on the hard day and their lessons and their homeworks and all these other things, I am the only person that's caring for them. If there is something big that comes up, I can call him and he'll talk to them and make sure they're okay. He still cares for them.
Sometimes I feel like he is patting himself on the back about that. Like, he posted something to his Instagram stories about shout out to all the dads who are cleaning doing the dishes, doing the laundry, and, getting the kids ready in the morning. And I was like, why do you need a shout out? It's like, they don't make shout outs for moms because you are supposed to do this. People ask me when I'm traveling, well, who's taking care of your daughter? The person who helped create her. And most of the time that comes from women. That question comes from women. It doesn't come from men. My mom seemed like Superwoman. She did everything. She worked. She, cooked dinner. She, instilled moral values, and it felt like she was doing everything all the time. She was doing our hair every week, which we had a lot of hair. She just did everything. And my husband is similar. Like, his mom did everything. She cooked dinner every single night, after working a full 8-10 hour day, for a family of 5. So when you're not following in that model, or if you're not cooking from scratch and making, buying all the groceries and working, and yet still volunteering at your child's school and still cleaning your house, right? It feels like you have failed in some ways.
I wish new parents could just find a way to take a deep breath and not be so hard on themselves and not feel guilty about the choices that they make. You're doing the best you can, right? You're doing the best you can for yourself and for your family.
There are career and definitely life opportunities that I've passed on as a mom, and I feel I'm okay about it. In the moment, sometimes I'm really disappointed. I am okay with leaving some opportunities on the table if it means that, I don't know, I get to spend more time with my daughter, with my family, or doing other things that are important to me.
The pro is you have your leisure time. You can decide when to do what. You can take care of yourself. The cons are you stop working, so you don't like for me, I grew up in Taiwan, so my English is not I am like not native, so I need to learn to educate myself to, be able to do conversation with a very professional way, but I don't get to practice that side. So I feel like my English is getting worse. Even I lose the chance to being successful, I see my daughter grow happily, go into the right path. My husband's happy with the work. I'm happy, so that's my fulfillment.
I started the company when I was pregnant with my son, and he was my second. Having a kid do or bring into your life is this very physical and visceral reminder of time and how limited we have, like how limited our time is.
One of the best things I do to distract myself is to work. I love to work. I have a very strong work ethic, and I really enjoy working. And so I'm there in the hospital, I'm on my phone and I'm texting, and then I get a call from my colleague who was starting his thing up, and he's getting uptight, and I'm getting uptight, and I'm yelling, and the machines are beeping and going crazy. And at one point my husband just reached over, he grabbed my phone and he shattered it on the floor, and he was like, if you can't be present for the birth of your child, I think this parenthood thing is going to be pretty hard for you. And I was like, fair point. I think that on the back end, now that my children are both here, it still is easy to pick up my phone and reconnect to work, because we're just all on all the time. And I think that what my children help me to do and help remind me to do is to just be here. And whether it's, being silly or going on a walk when I'm trying to get things done, to stop and look at that weird worm on the sidewalk that's, trying to squiggle its way back into the mud. We might be late for dinner, but it's okay. And so I think that's the most immediate gift I think they've given me, is like being okay, letting go of something, so just enjoy the moment. Because of my own experience, I don't think that there's a right time or a wrong time. There are obviously better times than others. Of course, in the planning state of thinking about having a family, you think about financial stability, you think about the home in which you would like to bring them into.
There is no great time to have kids, but I can say that it's the greatest thing that's ever happened to me. And I'm so grateful that it did. So if you want to have children, don't let your career get in the way of that. And even if you have a hiccup, you start again somewhere else. You may fail at a career or a career choice or a company for reasons that have nothing to do with children. And you're gonna have to start over again anyhow. So, go boldly and have those kids, because it will change your life in such a wonderful way. There's never been a greater time to be a working mom.
I can't imagine not being a parent. It's sort of hard for me to think about what that would look like.